All right, boys and girls, welcome back to another edition of The Big Ben Show. I'm your host, Ben Domenech, coming to you from Washington, D.C., the nation's capital. And I want to talk to you today about something interesting that happened over the course of the past week. One that we mentioned on last week's show with our guest, Mike Solana, a symbol, perhaps, for the nature of these protests that are happening across the country, opposing ICE and demonstrating against President Trump. You may have seen some of the images from these protests over the course of the weekend, these No Kings protests that purportedly had over 5 million attendees, if you believe their sponsors. And you might have noticed something in particular about the people who went out and participated in these protests. Cut one.
I'm just so scared. I'm 74 years old. I worry about everything, and I just am so scared and upset, and I don't understand.
Cut two.
How's it feel to get arrested at 87? He said, I'm just beginning.
I'm just beginning, my friend.
Just beginning, okay.
I'm going to just get a little sleep, but I'm starting again.
Yeah, that's right. These people were not exactly spring chickens who came out to these No Kings protests. They were very much of the gray-haired set, people who are really looking at things in American politics right now with confusion and with holding on to a lot of things that they see escaping their grasp. And that symbol that we talked about last week was of these burning robot cars, Waymos, that were called by protesters to come to their anti-ICE demonstration, where they were promptly graffitied and set on fire. From Mike Solana's perspective, he compared that to the elves leaving Middle-earth, which a scene you might remember. Cut 13.
They're going to the harbor beyond the White Towers, to the Grey Havens.
They're leaving Middle-earth,
never to return. I don't know why. It makes me sad.
The sadness that you're talking about there is one of loss of something special, but it's also something about being opposed to knowledge, being opposed to a future that has promise within it. And so whether you want to take Solana's comparison on its face or not as being indicative, what you do see is a new situation in this moment where the tools of protest, the tools of sabotage publicly, also have a vote, meaning the Waymos that were going and being directed to go and get burned and lit on fire and graffitied in the instance here, they also take a lesson from that, which is not to go to that part of town, not to respond to the calls from people who are only going to make use of them as tools of destruction. Now, of course, you could anticipate what this is going to look like in the next couple of years, where you may end up with robot deserts the same way that you have food deserts. But from my perspective, part of this is of the nature of the current progressive left, which has rejected so much of the progress that we have seen under American capitalism achieved over the past half century in particular. There is an actual fight with the future, I think, going on here, one that is of a piece with so much of the left's backwards beliefs. Cut 6.
Union here today are pointing to the ongoing safety concerns with the robo-taxis, citing a 2021 and 2022 report from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, stating Waymo had the most automated driving system crashes of any self-driving vehicle company. But Waymo says autonomous driving technology promises safer roads and increased mobility for millions of people, as millions of traffic collisions are the result of human errors like speeding, phone distractions, fatigue, and drunk driving.
These protesters are opposed to the institution of these new robot cars, even though they actually are much safer than a lot of the human-controlled cars. And these are the kinds of arguments that they advance. Cut 3.
We see this rollout of self-driving technology as a tipping point for rolling out the new age of AI. So AI, automation, we're talking about millions, if not billions, of workers being displaced, not just here locally, but nationally and globally.
Cut 4.
Imagine those vehicles going down the highway at 70 plus miles an hour with no human being there in case of a default. It's dangerous.
From my perspective, it's just as dangerous to have somebody driving drunk at 70 miles an hour going down that highway. In fact, it's a lot more dangerous statistically. And so one of the things that is going on here, of course, is the left's embrace over and over again of anti-progress, anti-future focused policies and developments within technology that challenge their existing structures, that challenge their existing institutions, that challenge the kind of things that their unions have enforced and built over the years at much political cost to them. And now they want to defend that position. They want to defend it the same way that bureaucrats want to defend their fiefdoms in Washington, D.C., because they want to hold on to power and because they don't particularly care about the American quality of life. The truth is that there are a lot of people who would like us to stay in this portion of American existence where people had to do backbreaking work in order to achieve the kind of lives that they wanted to have, that they had to be sore and in pain at the end of every day in order to come home from jobs that are built on the technologies of the past. Instead, with the course of American capitalism, the developments of Silicon Valley and others within the tech industry, the advancements that we currently see all around us, I feel like we should be very optimistic and hopeful about the future, about the ability to have more and more people working in lives that do not require them to engage in such backbreaking behavior or have their lives cut short, have their quality of life diminished because of holding on to Luddite approaches to the way that we ought to live. Tradition, history, religion, values, these are all things that are built in the old, but we should have an embrace of the new in terms of our attitude toward these different technologies that are creating, in so many ways, a better life. Are they all to the good? Of course not. We have to raise ethical questions about them. We have to, consider the different values that we're putting into place through them, and also guard the minds of our children when it comes to their the influence of these various technologies on them, perhaps leading them to have different experiences and different challenges in life than those of us had in the past before these technologies existed. Those are all important things, but the just drop-kick rejection of developments within the technology world, of things that represent actual progress for humanity, is now almost entirely on the American left. Those are the people who are rejecting the future, who are fighting it. They do not want and embrace a future that is defined by America. Instead, they're engaged in a doomerish cult based on their own views about the inevitability of a climate Armageddon, embracing abortion and euthanasia in order to lower the number of humans on this planet. That's the opposite of believing in the future. That's the opposite of believing in a world that should have and welcome more lives in it, and that should provide for them in ways that are new, innovative, and allow them to live better lives than the people who came before. If the left wants to give up on that, that's fine. But whatever they want to call that, it's not progress. And instead, I think they should be about making that progress driven by America. That's not a partisan thing to believe in. It's something that we should all accept, both right and left, so that we can get true quality robot cars. Cut 14.
Duck! I can't let the boys see me with you.
What?
Hi.
Hey, look, Homer's got one of those robot cars.
One of those American robot cars.
I don't know about you, but I want the future to be defined and built by America. The world is better when America leads. And if the left wants to disagree with that, they're welcome to that position. You're listening to The Big Ben Show, brought to you by Fox News. You can email us at bigben@fox.com. Follow me on Twitter @bdominich. Subscribe to my newsletter, The Transom, at thetransom.com, and the magazine that I edit, The Spectator, at thespectator.com. Repeat guest, Lucas Tomlinson. He serves as correspondent for us over here at the Fox News channel. You can also follow him on X at Lucas Fox News. And Lucas, I want to talk to you about the latest regarding Israel and Iran. First, let me get your reaction to these comments today as we're recording from President Trump talking on the White House lawn. Cut 15.
Two very simple words, very simple, unconditional surrender. That means I've had it. Okay, I've had it, I give up, no more. Then we go blow up all the, all the nuclear stuff that's all over the place there. No, they had bad intentions. You know, for 40 years they've been saying death to America, death to Israel, death to anybody else that they didn't like. They were bullies. They were schoolyard bullies. And now they're not bullies anymore, but we'll see what happens. Look, nothing's finished until it's finished. You know, war is very complex. A lot of bad things can happen. A lot of turns are made. So I don't know. I wouldn't say that we won anything yet. I would say that we sure as hell made a lot of progress. And we'll see. The next week is going to be very big, maybe less than a week, maybe less.
The next week is going to be very big, maybe less than a week. What's your reaction to what the president just said today?
Well, I'm glad I came a little bit early to the show, Ben, because right when I was going to sit down, you said you had another guest, so I sat in the green room. I heard President Trump's comments there on the South Lawn. He was in the groundbreaking for 2 flagpoles going in. What the president also said when he was asked specifically if the United States, if he would launch airstrikes to destroy Iran's nuclear sites, said, I may do it, I may not do it. Mm-hmm. So a little bit of strategic ambiguity there. I don't think he has to do it. I think there's something that not a lot of people are talking about. There is a ground option, talking about Fordo, the underground Iranian nuclear site.
Which has been at the center of a lot of these discussions because essentially if you don't go after that, then Iran will maintain nuclear capability well beyond everything that's happened, even, having survived significant setbacks, especially in terms of manpower.
There's no question. This isn't just splitting atoms or isotopes. There's a reason it's buried so deep under the ground in a mountain 2 hours south of Tehran. This is clearly the center of Iran's nuclear weapons program. Officials I've spoken to say the Israelis do have a ground option. If you recall back in September, the Israelis deployed an elite commando unit for their Air Force, Unit 5101, Shaldag. They went into an underground missile facility in Syria and destroyed a host of Iranian missiles bound for Hezbollah. That same unit could be used for Fordo. Right now, we see what the Israelis are doing. They've destroyed all the air defense sites in Iran. They own the skies. They're taking out nuclear sites. They're taking out the most pressing threat, of course, are the missile launchers. You can't have Iranian ballistic missiles hitting Tel Aviv and other parts of Israel. Once that is done and the ground is clear, you can send in a unit. Everybody's become very fixated on a B-2 strike. Everybody's watching Whiteman Air Force Base where the B-2 fleet is based in Missouri. But it goes beyond that. Also, the B-2 option is not a silver bullet. You have to stack those bunker busters, these 30,000-pound bombs, essentially on the same spot to keep going deep, deep into the ground. But, the Israelis are probably going to want some intelligence. They're going to want photos. They're going to want hard drives, maybe even snatch a few more scientists. They want evidence, and they can destroy it themselves with a ground unit. Something to think about.
Is that mission essentially a suicide mission, though?
Not necessarily. Fordo is on IRGC base, Islamic Revolutionary Guard base, but as they keep going through the strike list, again, destroying the launchers, that's number one right now. Or number one, they already did with the surface-to-air missile sites. Got to take out the missile launchers. Can't have Iranian ballistic missiles coming into Israel, coming in at Mach 6. Can't have that. And there's been casualties. We've seen some buildings hit. But once the ground is clear and there is a path, there's no reason. It would be high stakes, no question. I'm not saying there's a walk in the park, and certainly Iran is a lot more contested than Syria. There's no question. They need a protection force, a ground force, but you could send in a strike force with these elite Israeli commandos. Shaldag.
Well, I think one of the things that we should keep in mind, too, is that the Israelis couldn't – I don't think that they would ever go into a situation like this without having a backup plan if the United States said no.
There's no question. And it wouldn't be a suicide mission. You have a second aircraft carrier strike group, the Nimitz strike group coming over from the Pacific, should be on station in about a week. You already have the Vincent strike group. The Air Force is sending tankers, F-16s, fifth-gen jets, F-22s, F-35s. There's certainly some American muscle being assembled in the Middle East.
You have obviously been watching this since its beginning, and one of the things that we're very aware of here is the political conversation within the American right about Donald Trump's approach to this. He has, put his foot down in terms of establishing, I am the definer of what America first means.
MAGA.
Even in the opposition from some people within his own party, including some members of Congress like Marjorie Taylor Greene. The thing that I'm interested in, though, and I've been asked this myself, but I'm curious as to your perspective, is how significant is that? From my perspective, I don't think it's that politically significant, in part because the president is so incredibly popular among Republican voters, but also because Republicans historically have never had a problem with killing terrorists or killing people who they view as
Soleimani.
Yes, exactly. As threats. From my perspective, their reluctance when it comes to American foreign policy and national security, informed by the last 2 decades, is for boots on the ground, regime change wars that seem to have no end in sight.
Which this doesn't look like it's going to. The president's been very clear there's not going to be American boots on the ground. The Israelis have not requested it. There's not even that many Israeli boots on the ground besides Mossad and some of these tier one forces they have. 80% of Republicans support what the United States is doing vis-a-vis Israel, helping Israel. Whether or not he makes the decision to launch airstrikes against Iran, certainly the president is weighing that in his calculations. We talk about the military option. The president yesterday met with the National Security Council in the Situation Room. There's no question a range of options were presented. Whether the president has agreed to any of them definitively, it's not clear right now. But the B-2 is not the silver lining everybody says it is. We've been hearing a lot about it, like, oh, you just send in the B-2s. Heard a lot of lawmakers, finish it off, 4-0, go take out this nuclear enrichment site. But the United States can do a lot of stuff behind the scenes. There's certainly a lot of intelligence sharing going on. Deploying these tankers is not just for the American jets. These refueling planes can help the Israelis. They don't have a big fleet of refueling planes. The American tankers can help pass gas at 40,000 feet. They can do all that. And when you own the skies, the risk, of course, is much less. But in terms of political ramifications, there's no question that's part of the calculus that the president is thinking about whether he decides to jump in on this. And by the way, the Israelis are doing pretty damn good job on their own. Yeah.
And I think that that's something that, Americans tend to support when you have countries that are willing to do that and not have American lives put at risk. They certainly are much more willing to entertain that. From your perspective, does this is the strategic ambiguity that came before that within that 60-day period where the president basically said, you've got 60 days, Iran, to come and negotiate with Witkoff and with others, and you really didn't see progress happening there at all. Do you believe, as has been reported, that that was something that was an intentional bit of strategic ambiguity on the president's part, or do you think this was a situation where he kind of is now, having had Israel make the decision that they made, he is now effectively going along with it?
There's no question Bibi had his stopwatch. When 60 days ended, those jets were in the air. The bombs landed a short time afterwards. The president's been very clear, Iran is not going to have a nuclear weapon.
Yes.
And when you went to the Kennedy Center last week to watch Les Mis, it was not a press conference. It was not a big speech. But he spoke to reporters. The look on his face, even when he departed the White House to go over to the Kennedy Center, he looked very earnest. He's not always so earnest. And he said Iran will not have a nuclear weapon. Clearly, he knew these strikes were coming. In fact, we heard with Prime Minister Netanyahu's interview with our own Brett Baer over the weekend, the White House had been informed, President Trump had been informed this was happening. I think even President Trump was exasperated over the talks. There's no question. He has said as much. They had 60 days. President has done some negotiating in his career before he entered the White House. Since I think he knows when you're not going to get to it. Yes, the Iranians were stalling, and there's no question that's why he's been very supportive of what Israel's done.
Well, I think his view is somewhat informed by past experience. He obviously, like you said, has been emphatic on this point. The list of quotes that the White House released the other day went all the way back to 2011.
Right? How about that? And the White House put it out.
Yes.
It was actually a message.
It was clearly they felt the need to put that out, in part, I think, because he felt that things were being falsely depicted about his positioning on this. And I think that it's also informed perhaps by his distrust of the Iranians for reasons along the lines of this. Cut 10.
We are 2 months away from enriching weapons-grade uranium to be used for peaceful purposes. It will be used only for medical research and clean energy. It will, and will certainly never be used to attack oh boy.
So that from the dictator is
he was right about clean energy.
Pretty much the way that the Iranians have approached this. When you look at this situation right now, Lucas, we've been talking about Iran being this close to having a nuclear weapon for a very long time.
Remember Bibi at the UN with the giant bomb,
and
the red marker?
There's been a good deal of disputes in terms of the intel community about how close they actually are. From my perspective, though, does that really matter as a question, just given the amount of enriched material that they have?
It's irrelevant because the time to strike, according to Israel's calculus, was now.
Yeah.
Iranians launched 2 ballistic missile barrages in the past year before this current war. They already destroyed the Russian S-300 surface-to-air missile system. They had already launched strikes. They already showed Iran they could do it. The time to act was now. It's not necessarily, Iran was about to go nuclear. That's only a small part of this. And by the way, we did hear from the Prime Minister when he told Brett some new intelligence had come forward. He shared it with the White House, which was some of the reason they launched the strikes when they did. But it's certainly about the timing. Iran was weak. Israel had destroyed Hezbollah, destroyed Hamas, killed Nasrallah, killed the leader of Hamas. The momentum was on their side. Would you say, Ben?
Yeah. Let's go out on this, Lucas. I think that in advance of this, there was significant argument about how strong Iran really was, whether they were something that needed to be feared that would result in thousands and thousands of people dying, innocent people being killed because of any kind of strike. That was certainly the prediction of some people who were, arguing against any kind of strike from Israel or from America. And then there was another perspective, one which I happen to hold, which is that as soon as Israel had achieved a point where they had fundamentally degraded the proxy groups that work for Iran, that Iran was a much less scary thing to take on. They didn't have the capability of power projection in the way that they did even a year and a half ago. Yeah. What's your perspective on that debate?
The Shia crescent that extended from Tehran to Beirut was severed, thanks to the Israelis. Syria used to be a forward operating base for the Iranians. That was destroyed when Hezbollah was taken out, when the Assad regime fell. Now you have a new leader in there. He's getting support from the United States, from the West. We saw President Trump meeting the new Syrian president when he was in Saudi Arabia last month. There's no question that Iran is at the weakest position it's ever been, and not just in the last few days going into this war. And that is part of Bibi's calculus, that the time to strike, the nuclear timeline is only part of this, is you strike when your enemy is weak. That's what they did with Hamas. Hezbollah degraded. The Syrian base is destroyed. This is the time. And you're right, Iran has the largest used to have the largest ballistic missile arsenal in the Middle East. But what you're seeing is Israel destroying the launchers. You can have a missile, but if there's no way to launch it, it's kind of a problem.
Lucas Tomlinson, you can follow him on Twitter at Lucas Fox News. Thanks so much for taking the time to join me today on The Big Ben Show.
And this was fantastic.
We'll be right back with more of The Big Ben Show with Newt Gingrich coming up next. Joining me now, former House Speaker Newt Gingrich, Fox News contributor and author of the new book, Trump's Triumph, America's Greatest Comeback. And Speaker Gingrich, I want to first off say happy birthday and congratulations on what I'm told is your 14th New York Times bestseller.
No, we're very excited by it, and I think Trump's Triumph actually is an important story about both how we got here and where we could potentially go from here.
I want to talk to you about the book, but first off, I just want to get your initial reaction, obviously, to the news that has been breaking and taking over the conversation here over the past week as it relates to Israel's attacks on Iran and the way that President Trump in particular has handled this situation, how he's approached it. You obviously have been aware of these issues for such a long time and paying attention to them for a long time. Are you surprised at the approach that ultimately led to these strikes? And what do you think of the way that President Trump has handled it?
Well, I think that he was very clear early on that he would like to get to a peaceful agreement. He said he had 60 days, which I think is very interesting and makes one wonder to what extent he and Netanyahu had an agreement that on day 61, the Iranians had failed. But Trump has also been very, very clear that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. And frankly, I just wrote a piece at Gingrich 360. In 1978, the Ayatollah Khomeini began referring to us as the great Satan and Israel as the little Satan, beginning in 1979, when they illegally took over the American embassy and held 52 American diplomats hostage for 444 days. During the takeover, they were chanting death to America. They wanted death to the Shah. Later on, they added death to Israel. So, you've had basically a lifetime of these guys. As recently as a couple months ago, the Ayatollah Khomeini went on national television and said, I want to reassure you, death to America is not a slogan, it's a policy. Well, Franklin Roosevelt in 1941 gave an address to the country in which he said, if you're standing next to a rattlesnake, you don't have to let it bite you 5 or 6 times to figure out that it's bad. I think, what the Israelis have done is exactly right. I personally believe that the goal has to be regime change, not just destroying the missiles and the nuclear capability. Because if this dictatorship stays in charge, they're going to go right back and rebuild it. And 5 or 10 years from now, we're going to have the same crisis. So I think we want to get to a peaceful, open Iran that could become very prosperous, that has no strategic missile program and no nuclear program. And I think whatever it takes to get to that, which I think the Israelis can probably achieve over time, we should do. It's up to the president whether or not to use American war power to take out the one major facility that's in a mountain. But the truth is, if we replace the regime, part of the peace settlement could be that they take apart in a measurable, accountable way exactly the same facility.
The things that have been conversation points around this over the course of the past couple of years has been a debate about the level of strength that the Iranian regime really had. Their ability to project power through their proxy groups, et cetera, was a real risk for those who believed that they shouldn't have a nuclear weapon, but that there could be follow-on effects from any types of strikes along these lines. Is the lesson of what Israel has been able to achieve in the past year plus of activity that essentially the Iranian regime is now at its weakest point, at its most exposed in terms of an ability to really make the reality either of a change or certainly eliminating their nuclear program happen?
Well, I think there have been 2 or 3 crises, at least one under Barack Obama, where you had millions of people in the street trying to overthrow the regime. A couple of years ago, you had a young woman beaten to death for not covering her hair properly, and that led to a huge mass movement, which ultimately led to 500 people being hung in public. This regime has always had a very shaky totalitarian ability to dominate about 80% of the population who hate it. The truth is the Iranian people are desperate to get rid of this government, but the government is ruthless, well organized. But again, Clifton and I have been watching a TV series called Tehran, which is about Mossad operating inside Tehran. And it's a novel, it's fiction, but it gives you a flavor. And the fact is, the Israelis have so many people among the Iranian population helping them that they built an entire factory inside Tehran to build drones, which they use to take out the Iranian air defenses from inside the city. Now, that tells you that the penetration level is amazing. And I think I personally believe they should rapidly start shifting over to destroying the Revolutionary Guard and encouraging the army to rebel and side with the people. And you would have the regime gone in 2 or 3 weeks, I think.
Mm-hmm. The prospects of what have to happen here now going forward, Do you think that the United States runs a risk of being drawn more fully into this conflict, or do you believe that they can essentially continue what they've been doing, supporting the Israelis and keeping it a little bit at an arm's length, just given that the president himself clearly has a faction of his supporters who don't want him to even be doing what he's doing right now?
You know, I'm actually writing today for the New York Sun for tomorrow an article on war winning versus war fighting, which is a theme I've been developing, that we've spent far too much time focusing on war fighting, which we do brilliantly, but we don't necessarily win. And that war winning is a very different operation. I have no problem with B-2s and B-52s being used to complete the destruction of the Iranian nuclear infrastructure and the Iranian missile system. And the truth is, one B-2 is the equivalent, because it carries, I think, 128 bombs if they're conventional, it is the equivalent of an entire wing of B-17s in World War II, because they're precision-guided bombs. So if the president decides he wants to help the Israelis mop up, I'm not offended by that, and I don't think it's a particularly big danger. I would be deeply opposed to us trying to get involved in nation building or us trying to put ground troops in. I said in 2003, and frankly irritated Bush and Cheney pretty badly, because I said publicly we had gone off a cliff because we had, instead of going in, decapitating the dictatorship, getting rid of the Republican Guard and putting the regular army in charge, we went in and we disbanded the army and replaced it with American troops in one of the dumbest strategic acts in the American system. Similarly, in Afghanistan, you either had to go into Pakistan or accept that you were never going to defeat the Taliban. We were not willing to go into Pakistan, which to me meant we were never going to win. And I think you've got to decide what you're trying to accomplish. We want to have a post-Mullah, post-dictatorship Iran, which, by the way, would lead hundreds of American Iranians, who many of whom are very wealthy, to invest in rebuilding the country, not with American tax dollars, but with entrepreneurial creativity and free enterprise, making money both for the Iranian Americans and for the Iranian people. That's the kind of nation building we should be doing in the private sector, not with government bureaucrats and government troops.
I want to shift to talking about your book, and one of the things that I think is important critically about it is that, you know, we are at risk, I think, in the absence of books like yours, of having the people who desperately want to write the first draft of history, write a revisionist tale of Donald Trump's return to the White House, a look back that does not actually tell the honest truth about how he got there. And I think you see it actually already in some of the ways that they have spun the Kamala Harris effort and everything going on to lay this all at the feet of Joe Biden, or to say that it's a fluke or something along those lines. Talk to me about the historical nature of this political comeback and what makes it such a remarkable feat.
Well, I mean, the reason I called it Trump's triumph and America's greatest comeback is that I think it was the movement and the man. I do not think you can understand Trump's survival through 4 years in the wilderness without the movement. And I don't think you can imagine the movement winning without Trump. I was really struck about 2021 or 22. Callista and I were in Decorah, Iowa. It's a small town in eastern Iowa. She'd gone to Luther College and she was getting a Lifetime Achievement Award. And we're walking down Main Street of this town of about 9,000. And there's a Trump store. Now, it's not a campaign store. It's not paid for by Mar-a-Lago. It's a group of local people in that county who have decided they want to have a store that will sell Trump products and Trump posters and Trump hats, etc., because it was a spontaneous rebellion against the East Coast, and I think, and the West Coast for that matter. And I think that people did not realize that you have this parallelism. You have the most effective, charismatic leader since Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and you have a mass movement that is furious at Washington and furious at the radical left, and that is determined to get real change. The two came together in a way that's really remarkable, and you have to give him, Trump, a great deal of the credit. Just brute courage, willingness to work hard, extraordinary skills as an entertainer and as an educator. But you also have to give the American people a lot of credit, because no matter how often they were lied to, they never believed it, and they never deviated for 1 minute.
Why do you believe that the American left was so invested in repeating the mistake that they made in 2015 and 2016 of essentially setting up everything for Donald Trump to become the nominee? Meaning, if you rewind to the previous summer before the Mar-a-Lago raid, there was a point at which, Trump was actually down to DeSantis in terms of the primary voting, where there were a lot of people who were like, is he going to run? Is it a situation where, he's got all these different distractions that are coming his way? Is this going to be one where he can even run an effective campaign? And instead, it seemed like the American left was purposefully invested in the idea that they wanted him to run again, and they believed somehow that these legal challenges would be a detraction as opposed to motivating his supporters all the more. Why did they make that mistake not effectively once but twice?
Well, look, I think that the American left resembles the French Bourbons who forgot nothing and learned nothing. They're totally involved. I have a good friend who is very sophisticated and talked about the fact that when he talks to his left-wing friends and goes to their cocktail parties, they actually think all this nutty stuff is working. Mm-hmm. You just saw this over the weekend. The term "no kings" is, and I've thought about writing a newsletter about this, the term "no kings" is stupid.
Yes.
First of all, it's negative. Second, nobody believes Donald Trump is a king or that there's any danger of America becoming a monarchy. Third, it doesn't answer any problems of normal people. And fourth, it sets up little rallies where weird people get together to talk weirdly on television to remind all of us that those are the people we defeated. I mean, you couldn't invent this stuff.
I was interested in a particular symbol that I talked about on the show today that came out of the LA anti-ICE riots, but seems to me to be of the nature of the left today. And I'm sure you've seen it. It's the image of graffitied, burning robot cars, the Waymos, that they called, protesters apparently called purposefully to their location in order to destroy. How can people call themselves progressives when that's their attitude towards actual technological progress?
Well, I have to tell you that one of the things that came out of my conversations with the very sophisticated person I was describing is he wrote me a note and he said, "Gang lives matter" could be the next Democratic slogan. And I liked it so much, I posted it immediately on both X and Truth Social. And I think I had 37,000 likes in like 4 hours. I mean, it was, these people are nuts. I mean, first of all, I don't care what they call themselves. They are a left-wing reactionary lunatic group getting together to as a quasi-religious experience, totally incapable of dealing with the real world and totally rejecting negative feedback. And if you'll notice, the Democratic Party is drifting towards a civil war. Two of its major union leaders resigned from the Democratic National Committee. The gap, I think, that is growing, AOC running against Schumer, which, and I think actually Schumer may retire and not run. But AOC as the leading voice of the Democratic Party is almost as good as having Kamala Harris. And at the same time, you look at the mayor's race in New York, where your choice is between a crook and a crazy. And the question will be, can Cuomo buy enough votes to not get beaten by a guy who is clearly the populist underdog, but is a hardline socialist and deeply anti-Semitic person in the city which has the largest Jewish population of any city in the world? I mean, you couldn't write this stuff as a novel.
Mm-hmm. You see on the left, additionally, such a lack, you talk about a civil war, but such a lack of people who are willing to stand up and take the opposite view to some of their loudest and most extreme elements. And I think of that as being true, one, within, of course, as you identified it, the AOC perspective on immigration, on all of the different issues associated with that, by the way, which have completely gone against the interests of what used to be their working class base, which is why they're now part of the Trump movement. You see that unwillingness when it comes to taking on issues related to Palestine and Hamas, a sort of pro-Hamas faction within the left that really only John Fetterman has called out, along with a handful of other observers. And then, of course, you have this radicalism when it comes to the trans agenda and boys and girls sports, which became an issue that the left kept saying, this doesn't matter, all the way until they found out that it did matter on Election Day. From my perspective, as someone who has been rebuilding and building coalitions your entire career, what does the left need to do in order to actually rebuild a functional coalition? And does it require them to basically reject explicitly some of these extreme views that seem to be certainly, if not the most popular, but certainly the loudest within their own coalition currently?
Well, I think, first of all, they need to pray for the Republicans to be totally stupid. I mean, it's
happened before.
Well, yeah, that's right. I mean, we could drive them to victory by failing to perform. I always tell people that all we won in 2024 was a ticket to the dance. And now we have to dance well enough that in 26 we get another ticket to the dance. And then we have to dance well enough that we win the presidency in 28. And then maybe we can begin to consolidate. But we have to dance pretty well. And some days we do, some days we don't. So that's the first. I mean, if the Republicans actually perform, if we get the big, beautiful bill passed, if we get the tariffs worked out, if we get the kind of boom that we could have by next summer, so you have a Trump boom going into the 26th, and at the same time, the Democrats stay stuck on the left, you could see a situation where you could have a Roosevelt 1934 kind of election and have the Republicans consolidate. On the other hand, my sense is, and I've thought about this a lot, and thought about writing about it, because I was there as a campaign manager for a congressional race in '64 with Goldwater. I was there all through the Watergate cycle. We got down to 17% support at one point. And the friend who's been writing me thinks that the Democrats will go down to 25% by next summer. And although there's a poll out that we just did that actually shows them ahead on the generic ballot for the first time in 3 years, they're only up 1 point, but still, it's a sign that this is not a gimme yet. But Seth Keshel, who is a brilliant student of voter registration, I mean, talk about a unique, narrow focus. He looks at every county, every district in the country, and he says that in the states that register by party, the Republicans have gained 1,038,000 net since the election, and that the tide towards us continues to go, and that he's beginning to see, and you may see this in New Jersey, where the Republican is within 3 points of the Democrat for governor. And he said, what's happening is people are simply leaving the Democratic Party, and young people are registering as Republicans. And the combination of the two, he said, in every single state that you can measure by party, every single state, we had a migration towards us.
I think that's fascinating, obviously, but still, to your point about the poll that you just did, it does seem to me to be, not a foregone conclusion at all that Republicans can pull that off. Obviously, they need to deliver. One question about Republicans delivering on their promises. You obviously were an observer of the effects that Elon Musk and the Doge project had in terms of identifying a lot of the different horrible expenditures that are happening underneath the bureaucracy and that have been happening for a very long time, including waste, fraud, and abuse, of course, but also just things that we really do not want to be spending money on as a country. I'm curious about your attitude toward the lessons taken away from both Doge's success and Doge's failure to live up to some of the commitments or the promises that Musk himself and others around it seem to have, the boldness that they had with declaring that they would be able to find these huge levels of waste. How would you have messaged the Doge situation differently than they approached it?
Well, I would have. Look, I mean, first of all, Elon Musk is a genius. Mm. He has single-handedly dramatically reduced the cost of going into space by over 90%. And when the Starship finally starts working routinely, he'll reduce it another 15 or 20%. So I have enormous respect for Musk as an entrepreneurial genius. But like many entrepreneurial geniuses, like Henry Ford or Thomas Edison or others, he doesn't necessarily know anything at all about Washington or anything about effective government, which is a different art form. If they had come in quietly, focused on the results and not the personalities, and continued to methodically expose how bad it is, and there's a huge amount of data available if you really want to put it together. There's an open book project that is pretty remarkable. There are General Accounting Office's reports that are very remarkable. If you take all those pieces, you could have educated the country into the opportunity to dramatically reduce government just by not being stupid, or just by not financing things you don't like. There's a report out already that California is going to spend $10 or $11 billion on health care for illegal immigrants. And all of that's going to somehow end up coming out of the federal taxpayer sooner or later. And this is the kind of thing where there's overwhelming support for not funding people who don't work and for not funding people who are here illegally. So I think a quieter, more result-focused effort would have been more effective, but it would probably have been impossible given Musk's personality.
One of the interesting aspects of what you just said was the opposition that people have to stupid stuff. I think that one of the underestimated defects in the way that Washington talks about this problem is that it talks about it in terms of numbers. It does it in sort of a total, we're going to look for X amount of cuts or something like that. For the average voter, I don't think that they care about that. And in fact, if the number is big, it sounds like that could hit something that benefits me. Whereas what they do care about is learning about, I think, some of the stupidest stuff that we're paying for that they may or may not know that we're paying for. And when they learn about it, they're going, did you see this stupid thing that we were funding? I can't believe that my money was going to that. And I think that that's underestimated as an aspect of talking about this that could have gone a lot better, because there were some of the things that they were identifying that just normal, non-news addict people who I know were bringing up to me and as I walk around my neighborhood. What do you think about that?
Well, Joseph Napolitano was a Democratic consultant who wrote a very good book called The Election Game and How to Win It. And his key quote at the beginning of the book is, never underestimate the intelligence of the American people, nor overestimate the amount of information they have. And I think it's a great formula. Mm-hmm. A pruning operation that went through the entire federal government, including the Pentagon, mm-hmm. and pruned out things where it was, stupid or not stupid. If it's not stupid, don't prune it. If it's stupid, prune it. We would save hundreds of billions. The country would actually be grateful. It was very revealing to me a couple of weeks ago that the Rasmussen poll said for the first time in its 39-year history, 50% of the Americans felt we were on the right track. It never happened before. The chief pollster said he was shocked and he was convinced we would never get there. But I think it's because of things like you're describing. People looked at a serious effort by Trump, one, to control the border, which he did almost overnight, two, to go after illegals, which he did, and three, to begin to cut out things that are stupid. Well, those all worked for people. And then I think in a way that I had not considered when it started, the tariff fights work in part for Trump because he's standing up for America. People don't understand any of the details, but they have this gut sense that the Japanese or the Europeans or somebody, Chinese, have been ripping us off, and at least by God, he's fighting over it. And that gives him a residual claim on America first, which is when we did surveying way back in 1983, preparing for Reagan's his reelection, we found that the most powerful single phrase in America is American patriotism. Interestingly, the second most powerful phrase was gunboat diplomacy, which was 1 point less supported, but people identified as American nationalism. So despite all the efforts of the left, helping America, being for America, putting America first is still the most powerful single argument in American politics.
Donald Trump is obviously a very unique person, and you've gotten to know him well over the years. He obviously has been through a significant transition in his life from where he was in 2016, 2017 to where he is today, surviving the assassination attempts, going through all sorts of challenges in his business and private life, the degree to which the left came after him in a way that they'd never gone after anyone before other than Nixon, really. I'm curious about how you think that experience has changed him.
Well, let me start and say that Trump, better than any other politician, understands the Rush Limbaugh rule that you have to entertain people before you educate them. And he's essentially a vaudevillian. And the greatest mistake the news media made in 15 and 16 was not realizing that he had been a television star for 13 years. He understood the medium, he understood the market, and he was just better at it than anybody else. I think two things in a really serious way. One, I'm really struck when he first talked to Calista and me about possibly running in January of 2015. Objectively, I knew a lot more about running than he did because I've been doing it my whole life, and I'd run for president. There's no question in my mind today that he knows vastly more than I do because he's been president. He's known all the world leaders. He's thought about all these problems. He's had all these briefings. He's just a remarkably more informed person today than he was in 2015. Mm-hmm. Second, maybe more than any of our presidents except Roosevelt, who had polio and came back at a time when nobody could run for public office as a polio victim, and Washington, who in the battle when the British were ambushed, had 2 horses shot out from under him and 4 bullet holes in his coat, and was later told by an Indian chief that God must have some purpose for him because they had all tried to shoot at him. And the chief himself said, "I shot at you 13 times and I couldn't hit you." So, and Washington had this enormous confidence. I think Trump gained that during the time in the wilderness. I think had Trump gotten reelected in 20, he would not be Trump today. This is a man who has been through the fire. He's had 4 efforts to put him in jail, 2 impeachments, had the FBI and the CIA lie about him routinely, had the elite media go crazy lying about him, and had 2 efforts to kill him. And I talked to Mike Johnson, Speaker Johnson, who had been with him at Mar-a-Lago the day the Secret Service briefed him about the guy who was waiting in the grass at the golf course. And the second assassination attempt really shook him. And he and Mike went into a room and prayed for about an hour. And I think if you go back and look, for example, at his inaugural address this year, he talks about that his life had been saved, he thought, for the purpose of making America great again. And it reminded me, as you know, Calista and I had made both a movie about Reagan and a movie about John Paul II. When they met together for the first time, they had 2 topics. One was that they'd both been actors. John Paul had been an actor before he became a priest. They'd both been actors, and they'd both been shot. And they compared notes about What did it mean that God spared us? And they decided that God wanted them to defeat the Soviet Empire. So that was their mission. And I think in a similar way, Trump feels that, and I actually believe this, that it was absolutely providential that he survived Butler. If he had moved 1 second later, he would have been killed. And I think that he reached a conclusion that he has a seriousness about him today and almost a solemnness that he did not have. And at the same time, like Washington and FDR, he has a calm certainty that he can overcome virtually any obstacle. And I think that's what you're seeing, for example, in the way he's managing Gaza, Ukraine, and Iran, is somebody who probably couldn't have done it in his first term, but who has grown into the person he is now.
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right, by the way, about that 2020, 2024 difference, that he is a very different person having spent that time outside of government in the wilderness, even though it was only 4 years. Let's go out on this, Mr. Speaker. You know, you have tracked over the years these cultural trends that have resulted in major shifts in American politics. It seems to me at this point that the American right has a much, and I say that broadly, including, independents and leaners, et cetera. It seems to me that they have a much healthier attitude towards America's culture than the American left, in a way that was not necessarily true, or that I at least did not feel was true, certainly when I was growing up in the 1990s, et cetera. And that's something that I think is a critical problem for the country. We had recently a pollster on this program who had asked a question of a nationwide poll that I had put to him about the decay of American friendship, which found that overwhelmingly the people who said that they had ended friendships, or that their friends had ended friendships over politics, are on the American left. And it may not surprise you to learn that the highest portion of those are white, college-educated women. So that, to me, just kind of says, why do we have this difference today where Republicans and independents can say, oh, I can have friendships across political lines. I can be neighborly to my friends with whom I disagree, even if they have an "in this house" sign in front of their place. Why is it that the American left has adopted this attitude where you can't interact, you can't be friends across those lines, you can't have people you interact with in American society now in a way that I thought historically was just not consistent? It was something that would come up at flashpoints in American life, but was not this kind of consistent, you must remove these friends from your circle.
Well, I think two things. First of all, we are currently winning.
Yes.
And in the process of winning, we are literally a mortal threat to their world. If we win, you're going to start talking about men and women. You're going to start saying that boys probably shouldn't be in girls' bathrooms. You're going to say that merit matters more than group identity. We'll go down the list. If you're on the losing side of that equation, you are literally facing annihilation. And so there's a hunkering down bitterness, which is why I thought the No Kings thing was kind of fun. Now, on the other hand, and I'm trying to remember his name, the guy who invented 538, who was the New York
Nate
Times.
Silver.
Yeah, Silver the other day, and I'm going to write about this at some point. He had this small piece where he said that he had concluded that liberals were dramatically more likely to be depressed than conservatives. And it was something like 3-1 or 4-1. You were more likely to suffer from depression if you were a liberal. And I don't think that was just because of Trump. I think it's because, look, I'm a person of faith. And I think that faith gives you an enormous resilience to life's difficulties. And I think if you have no faith and you're relying on drugs and sex and self-deception, that you have a rise in suicides, you have a rise in drug overdoses, and that overwhelmingly on the left, as it became more and more secular, it became more and more depressed. And I think that's a part of what you're watching. And it becomes circular. We had a phrase when we were trying to build a majority. We talked about cheerful persistence. Well, if what you get is angry, bitter persistence, it drives people away. It doesn't encourage them. And luckily for our team, the other team has decided that anger and bitterness combined with stupidity and weird values is the path of the future. And that means that they are likely to begin to rival George McGovern in being alienated from the American people.
It's a far cry from the point where freedom and the flag was something that you could argue as being a bipartisan shared value, it seems to me. Speaker Gingrich, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to join me today. Your book, Trump's Triumph, America's Greatest Comeback, congratulations on it as a New York Times bestseller, your 14th. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. Time to welcome in our special guest today, Kara Kennedy. She's correspondent at The Spectator. She writes the Mom Wars newsletter on Substack, and you can follow her on X at Kara K. Claremont. Thanks so much, Kara, for joining me today alongside my producer, Christine. And we wanted to kind of end the show talking about things that were a little lighter than what we spent most of our time on today. And I know in your role as royal correspondent, you've been paying attention to some of the latest news as it regards Harry and Meghan. What's this latest PR shakeup thing about?
Oh, yeah. So they have a whole new team. I think 6 staff were booted in the past couple of weeks, and a whole new team have come in. And you can tell that there has been a big shakeup because you can see their strategy has changed a lot. So up until now, we have never seen the kids ever, to the point where there are a lot of conspiracies that the kids don't exist. That the pregnancies were fake.
Well, conspiracies that I happen to know that Christine herself is perhaps a subscriber, believer, and, I don't know, anonymous Reddit user suggesting.
So, if only I knew how to use that.
It's pretty damning. The thing with the conspiracies is I just don't think that they could pull it off. Is simply the reason that I believe that they have children.
Like they're not smart enough?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it would take a lot of people and a lot of corroboration to pull that off, to not only fake pregnancies but births, and then everything else. So, surrogates is something that they would have to be on top of too, I think.
So was that delivery room a video that went viral, was that part of the new team's new approach?
I think so, absolutely. I mean, what other way can you quash these rumors by putting a video up of that,
But hold on.
Yeah.
I mean, I've only been pregnant once, but my stomach didn't go in half as I was getting low before I was about to give birth. I mean, I have given birth, and I can tell you I was not dancing and dropping it like it's hot right before I was about to give birth. Now, I know there's...
Kara, what about you? Were you doing that?
I think I could have. I actually think I could have.
Wow.
People do it differently. I think I could have danced. I mean, I was kind of doing TikTok videos just before, but I'm Gen Z, so it's forgivable. She's millennial, so I don't know.
I think the kids are real. I believe she had the kids. She might even have had the first kid, but I do not. That video, come on. The stomach looks really strange to me. I've watched it over and over again. And listen,
You zaprudered it.
I really did. But here's the one thing I will say. I'm a huge Meghan Markle fan. The cheese stands alone. Really? I've always thought that she got a raw deal. I always thought they did not treat her correctly. The video do you remember that video a couple years ago when the reporter asked, "How are you doing?" And she said, "Thank you. Thank you for someone finally saying it." That broke my heart. That felt real to me.
Oh no, that's so fake. That's the fake thing.
It's so fake.
Oh my goodness.
No, I have to take Kara's side on this.
Of course.
That's totally
It's
fake.
so performative, and she does it every single time. And this is I think one of the big problems is just the cultural differences. I think she's so American, and I think that.
Right. What does that mean?
Royal family supporters are so British that they would just fundamentally at odds straight away, because the British stiff upper lip, you don't wear your heart on your sleeve, you don't really talk about feelings. And she wanted to come in, disrupt it all, talk about her feelings, talk about how nobody's asked her if she's okay. Like, do you think anybody asked the Queen if she was okay? I don't think anybody ever did, you know?
Yeah, I think that that's something fundamental that's going on there. And speaking of kind of the interaction between American audiences and things from the UK, we obviously have this incoming new launch of the Real Housewives of London that is slated for later this year. I know that there's been a rollout of who they all are, and some of them I think are familiar to American audiences. But I wanted to ask you, Kara, if you could maybe run us through who some of these personalities are that people will be getting to know.
So it's basically going to be a reboot of the very popular and very unjustly cancelled Ladies of London, which went on an indefinite hiatus in 2017. And it was surprising because Bravo fans loved it. It's often like described as the realest and rawest thing that Bravo ever made. It was very messy, a mix of British and American women. You had a load of different characters. And what people loved about Ladies of London, which the Real Housewives have kind of moved away from in the past few years, is that they had access and money, and a lot of it. And you don't really see that on the Real Housewives anymore, because as it changes and new cast members come in, they kind of want to come in and be a housewife and not like start off as a non-famous person. Whereas the Ladies of London really came in and didn't really know what to expect, and then were absolutely loved by Bravo fans. You had Annabelle Nielsen, who was married to a Rothschild and later a member of the Spencer Churchill family. She was a muse for Alexander McQueen. She died of a heart attack in 2018, which I think was a big reason that they stopped filming. And so this is basically a reboot. You have some of the old cast members. Sorry. So yeah, you basically have 6 English-based stars, Ladies of London alumni, Julia Angus.
Oh, I like her.
Who was very popular. She's very good friends with Lindsay Lohan. So she's a bit of a wild card. Then Amanda Cronin is coming in from the Real Housewives of Jersey, not New Jersey, which would be very fun crossover. But
bring Teresa over there.
Yeah, that would be.
Teresa's definitely my favorite. I'm rewatching Real Housewives of New Jersey right now.
So good.
And then you have former actress and pageant queen Julia Mayhew, socialite Panther Parker, which I'm very excited for, and businesswoman Nessie Welshinger.
So, Christine, just as a viewer, as an American viewer, how excited are you for this?
I'm very excited. I absolutely loved Ladies of London because it just gave us a different perspective. And you know what it's also is? I love, even when they're fighting, they sound so classy. It's totally different from when, us Jersey girls are throwing tables. It just feels a little more, eloquent. So I'm very excited about that. I'm very excited about the Real Housewives of Rhode Island because I think that's going to be more on the Jersey, like Italian, angry side, which we all love over here. Yeah. But no, I am really excited. But I was going to ask you, Kara, like the one thing I will say and I think you hit on it, was you watched the Housewives, especially from the beginning. What started with OC is because they were behind the gates. These were moms. These were business women married to such wealthy men. And they were showing you a life that most of us, we weren't living. And it was amazing to see how their families interacted. And little by little, season by season, everything changed. You really didn't even get to see the background of most people and how they were living their lives. I'm just watching people that probably didn't even know each other very well before they were cast, just fighting. And it's starting to become fake. It's starting to become put on a little bit. And I wish they would go back to those early days of OC and New York, like that original cast of New York. Bethany Frankel.
The original cast is
and
the epitome of the height of reality TV. But I think particularly with the Real Housewives franchises, it started off as aspirational, but also not aspirational, because you looked at these women's lives and you probably came away with it thinking, I do not want to be one of these women. But like you said, they started off as housewives married to very rich men.
Yep.
I mean, the funny thing about the housewives is they were all divorced by season 1. If you really pay attention, they were all divorced by season 1 or season 2. A lot of them went into it knowing that they were going to get divorced, and they needed a kind of payday to carry on their lifestyles. After that, you see that with like Countess Luann in
Camille Grammer.
Yeah, exactly. There's loads if you really pay attention. Now, I mean, the majority of the housewives are single business women. I don't really want to watch a woman doing her job on TV. I kind of want to watch like a stay-at-home mom with a truly disgusting amount of wealth, private jet, private planes, multiple holiday homes. That's what I want to see.
I guess, pickleball now. We're done with tennis, so I guess the moms will be playing pickleball.
So a quick question for both of you. You talk about how things have become more fake. What is, from your perspective, the situation right now for both of you of the housewife with maybe the fakest storyline? Something that just needs to go because it's just so obviously fake.
I could tell you right away, Housewives of New Jersey. They need a complete reboot. Every storyline just seems so put on. Melissa and Teresa, that whole thing's just got to go. I can't even tell if it's real.
I'm currently on, I think, season 5 of Real Housewives of New Jersey. I'm doing a rewatch. And that storyline between Melissa and Teresa has been from the very beginning. And I don't know how they've carried it on so long.
Well, because they were cashing in. So they probably, were trying to keep it going. But you can't tell. Sometimes it sounded really bad. And this is family. This is actually blood. There are children involved. And I think it just got to be a little too much. Also, Dorinda started to really bother me from New York. She also, let's be honest, a lot of these women have, and this is coming from someone who loves her wine and loves her cocktails. Some of these women have major drinking issues.
Yeah, and obviously that's a feature of some of the complaints that have been made.
It gets really dark really fast.
Very.
Doing a rewatch of New York was actually really sad, and I had to stop at season 12. You have multiple women going to rehab, going to prison, having divorces, and they're getting divorced from the show. The marriages are breaking down from being on the show.
Has any couple stayed together? Has there been any couple in all these franchises? I was always using Kyle and Mauricio, but now...
Kyle and Mauricio were always the example that you would use, and now that's gone. So I don't think so anymore. Talk about a housewife with fake storylines, though. Kyle Richards.
Gosh!
She absolutely keeps their franchise stuck in the mud because she has so much control over it. I think that the only way to save the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills is to get rid of her.
I actually agree with you, but I have one question here. Ben, it's interesting that you wanted to do a topic like this on your podcast after such a heavy conversation. But I know your wife is a super fan. I've seen her on with Andy. Are you a super fan? Are you watching along? Do you know the storylines?
So I would say that I could reasonably identify, certain storylines and things like that simply by osmosis. Here's the thing, though. I will admit this, and it is really a problem within the household at certain points in the year. I hate the reunion shows. I hate them.
They're the best.
Oh, that's the
and everybody
best
thinks
part.
that no. Seriously, my wife and everybody else thinks they're the best. I find it to be just like this reliving and this rehashing. And I think the reason is Andy is so good at manipulating them into the perfect position as an interviewer that I think on some level I'm just jealous that he's so good at this.
He's
a pretty phenomenal interviewer. It is his whole job. Like, he has one job, and it is to stir up drama.
But he knows how to stir and how to like lean into things and like hit that nerve over and over again.
Well, he's been doing it for years.
He sees all of the cuts as well. So there's a lot of stuff that goes on in the background that we don't see that he knows.
Ben,
so
would you,
that's a big part.
If they did a reboot of DC, remember, they used to have a DC one. Would you do it? Would you be a house husband?
I can't. First off, I would say no personally, but I can't actually speak for that because it's a question that has been raised in the past, very realistically, and so I can't speak for my wife. But anyway,
it would be perfect casting, and I would love to officially be your quote unquote assistant. And just so happens if I just pop up in DC all of a sudden, you're like, wow, I thought you were in New York.
And Housewives, I think, is a good mix because you have the on-screen time, you get the Instagram followers, you get the kind of cult following, but you don't have to put everything on show.
Oh my gosh, no! That would terrify me as a very private person in my own life. That would terrify me. Let's go out with this. I don't want to finish up the show before I ask you, Christine. I know that you are set to go and see the hottest show on Broadway this coming weekend, which I think was a gift for your husband of Glengarry Glen Ross.
Yes.
How much are you looking forward to that?
Not a ton. But
I heard you fell asleep during the movie.
Oh, I didn't want to say that because I know our upcoming guests would probably be very upset about that.
Yes, that's right. Everybody, we have David Mamet set to join us next week, and so I'm looking forward very much to that conversation and have a bunch of questions for him about his new book and about many other things. Kara, I want to thank you so much for joining us. I will definitely have you back when there's breaking housewife news for you to weigh in on, and you can continue your conversation with Christine about Meghan Markle's pregnancies or no. Thank you so much for taking the time to join the Big Ben Show today. For Christine, for Dylan, for the entire team here, thanks again for listening to the Big Ben Show. Send it to your friends, share it, subscribe to it, and send us an email at bigben@fox.com. We'll be back next week with more to dive back into the fray.